civilian.
Not anymore, you're not. Here's your helmet, soldier.
He ran back to work a week later after his kidney transplant. And,
Right.
his kidney reacted. I remember because I was 13 years old and I was crying because they had him there working.
I love the work. I truly love making people laugh.
Todd Bridges, now 59 years old, is finally telling the truth about Gary Coleman. For years, people have talked about sad things that may have happened to Gary. Some thought these were just rumors. I mean, Gary was a big star on Diff'rent Strokes, but he struggled with money, health problems, and personal issues.
The thing about, for Gary, because he was so big and because things that he was doing, to be a security guard had to be a serious low point for him.
Many people don't know the pain he carried and how badly he was treated. Why was his life so difficult? Todd Bridges is revealing it all, and it is even worse than people thought. Let's dig into the story.
If someone had told me that my life would have been like this early enough where
Gary Coleman was born in 1968, but he was not raised by his birth parents. Just 4 days after he was born, he was adopted by W.G. Willie Coleman and his wife, Sue. His father worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative, and his mother was a nurse practitioner. From the very beginning, Gary's life was full of challenges. He was born with serious health problems, and his biggest issue was a kidney disease called nephritis. This disease made his kidneys weak, so he had to go through dialysis treatments for most of his life.
And he also was never around kids.
Huh.
That's why his vocabulary was huge. He was only around adults.
Because of his kidney problems, Gary had to take a lot of medicine every day. He once joked that he swallowed so many pills that he should make a rattling sound when he moves. His condition also affected his growth. He never grew to a normal adult height. Even when he became a man, he was only 4 feet 8 inches tall. This made him look much younger than he really was. Despite his health struggles, Gary became a huge television star. He was best known for playing Arnold Jackson on the hit TV show Diff'rent Strokes. His character was funny and lovable, and people all over the world enjoyed watching him.
I'm a civilian.
Not anymore, you're not. Here's your helmet, soldier.
Gary was discovered when he was just 8 years old.
I'm a world-renowned celebrity. There's no place I can go where no one doesn't know.
The famous producer Norman Lear was looking for child actors, and Gary's talent stood out. His agent, Victor Perullo, said he had never seen a kid with such a sharp sense of humor. When Gary auditioned, he made everyone laugh. He even stayed for 3 hours reading lines with different people. The casting director knew he was special and insisted that Lear see him. From that moment, Gary's life changed forever. But what many fans did not know was that Gary was often very sick while filming the show. His co-star, Todd Bridges, shared a story about how Gary was brought back to work just 1 week after a kidney transplant. This was way too soon, and it was dangerous for Gary's health. His parents made him continue working. Todd was 13 years old at the time and remembers crying because he felt it was so unfair. But at that time, people in the entertainment industry only cared about making money. Gary's health should have been the top priority, but instead, he was forced to work too soon, after major surgery.
They brought him back to work way too fast. They brought him back to work a week later after his kidney transplant.
Since Gary was often sick, he could not be around other kids much. Doctors believed that being around kids could be dangerous for his health, so he spent most of his time with adults. This is why he spoke like a grown-up even though he was just a child. His vocabulary was very advanced because he was always listening to adults and learning from them. On TV, he seemed like a little man in a child's body.
He also was never around kids.
Huh.
That's why his vocabulary was huge. He was only around adults.
Right.
Because being around kids was dangerous for him.
Despite his health problems, Gary became very famous. His character on Diff'rent Strokes had a famous catchphrase. "What you talking about, Willis?" Many people do not know that this phrase was created by accident. Back then, scripts were written on typewriters. Someone made a mistake while typing, and the phrase came out wrong. When Gary read it, he said it so quickly and with so much personality that it became a huge part of the show. At first, he always said it to Todd's character, Willis. But later, he started saying it to other characters as well.
And if you notice, the first 5 years were always directed to me. It's directed to Willis, because Willis was the one that always kept messing up. So it was directed right at Willis.
The phrase became so popular that even years later, people still use it. Even in rap music, artists like the notorious B.I.G. mentioned it in their songs. Young people today sometimes say it without even knowing where it came from. Todd Bridges shared that even though Gary made millions from the show, he did not get to keep much of it. His parents and business advisors controlled his earnings. The money was supposed to be put into a trust fund, but they found ways to move it around. They said they were investing it to make more money, but in the end, Gary lost a lot of it.
But what happened with Gary was they're able to take that money, move it from a trust to whatever they want to.
Gary made around $18 million from acting. But when he grew up and tried to get his money, most of it was gone. In 1989, he sued his adoptive parents and his business advisor for taking $3.8 million. He won the lawsuit in 1993, but he only got back about $1.28 million. That was just a small part of what he had lost. He should have had at least $14 million left from his work on Diff'rent Strokes, but the money was mismanaged. One of the worst was opening an arcade business. He spent $100,000 on it, but he chose the wrong location. The arcade was in an area that was already struggling, and not many people went there. The business failed, and he lost even more money.
Where he got the arcade at wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
He got the arcade in a dying Marina Del Rey area.
Todd once shared a funny but serious story about Gary's driving. Gary was very short, and it was hard for him to see over the steering wheel. One time, Gary visited Todd and asked him to go for a ride. When Todd looked inside the car, he saw that Gary was sitting on phone books to be able to see the road. Todd refused to get in the car because he thought it was too dangerous. He told Gary, "If those phone books slide off, we're dead." Todd suggested Gary should use a booster seat, like a child, but Gary didn't want to. He just kept using the phone books.
He wanted me to go with him for a ride with him, and I'm like, I'm looking at the car, and it's like phone books in there.
Normally, an actor who stars in a hit TV show for many years would have many job offers afterward. But for Gary, it was not so easy. The problem was that Hollywood still saw him as a child because of his small size. Casting directors did not know what kind of roles to give him. He found it very difficult to get acting jobs. Over the next 10 years, he only managed to get a few guest roles on different TV shows. One of his most famous appearances after Diff'rent Strokes was on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, where he played his old character again. But these small roles were not enough to keep his career going. His former agent, Vic Perillo, once said that Hollywood simply did not have many roles for a black man who was only 4 feet 8 inches tall.
It was hard for Gary because of the size he was. What was he going to do? If he wasn't playing the oddity on the show, what was he going to do? I was playing,
When Diff'rent Strokes was canceled in 1986, he was exhausted. His friend Dion Mial, who is in the documentary, says Gary was completely drained. After the show ended, Gary fell into a deep depression. He did not want to act anymore. He told his friends he never wanted to work in Hollywood again. But the people around him did not listen. They kept pushing him to take more acting jobs, even when he was not happy.
And the problem is that, the media is going to make a big thing about it. They're going to embarrass you even more.
Yeah.
And that's the sad part about it.
A year after the show ended, Gary hit his lowest point. One night, he called Dion and told him he was going to end his life. Dion was shocked and scared. He rushed to Gary's house, not knowing what he would find. When he arrived, he saw Gary sitting alone at a keyboard, playing one note at a time. He was crying. Dion sat with him, comforted him, and let him cry. He told Gary that he didn't deserve to feel this way. He needed to take a break and get away from everything.
I'm a world-renowned celebrity. There's no place I can go where no one doesn't know me.
As the years went by, Gary continued to struggle. He had a hard time finding work, and he was not treated with respect. He eventually took a job as a security guard in the late 1990s. But even that led to trouble. In 1999, a woman asked him for an autograph, and an argument happened. Gary ended up punching her, and he was charged with assault. He had to pay a fine and got a suspended jail sentence. This was another huge setback for him.
You idiots! You boneheaded idiots!
After this incident, Gary felt like his life was falling apart again. He felt like people only wanted to make fun of him. He became more depressed and started avoiding people. His friend Anna Gray said he did not go out much anymore. He didn't trust people the way he used to. The experience changed him in a deep way. Dion Mial shared one of the saddest details in the documentary. He said Gary often called himself God's punching bag. He felt like life was unfair to him, and he was always suffering. In a letter to Dion, Gary wrote about his pain. He said he was hurt, confused, and broken. He felt alone and hopeless. He even thought about ending his life, but was too afraid.
He was doing to be a security guard had to be a serious low point for him.
Gary Coleman talked about his money problems in an interview. He told People magazine, "I have lifestyle requirements." He explained that he needed money for things like photos, meetings, lunches, dinners, taking care of his skin, and even his teeth. It cost a lot to live the way he wanted. But that was not the only reason he lost his money. Some of his investments did not work out. One of his biggest mistakes was putting $200,000 into a video game business. The business failed, and he lost all of that money. By 1999, he was making only $24,000 a year. That was a huge difference from when he was rich. Because of all these problems, Gary Coleman decided to file for bankruptcy. This means he told the court that he could not pay his debts. He admitted that many people were to blame for his money troubles. He blamed himself, but he also blamed his accountants, his adoptive parents, his agents, and his lawyers. Everyone had a part in what happened. Even though it was a bad situation, he tried to see it as a fresh start. He told reporters, "This is the last step to get rid of my past problems. I have been looking forward to this day." To make some money, Gary Coleman decided to sell some of his belongings. He partnered with a website to do an online auction. This was called a webathon. He hoped that selling his things would help him get some cash. Some people thought this might make him famous again, but he did not believe that. He told the Guardian newspaper, "I highly doubt that. The only way to get jobs in Hollywood is to already have jobs in Hollywood." Gary Coleman's personal life was also full of problems. In 2008, he revealed that he had secretly married a woman named Shannon Price. He was 40 years old, and she was only 22. Their marriage was unusual. They did not have a physical relationship. When people asked about this, Gary Coleman said, "It's my business. It will happen when it happens." Their relationship was not a happy one. Just 1 year later, Shannon Price was arrested for domestic violence. This means she was violent toward him. The police were called to their home, and when they arrived, Shannon was very angry. She yelled at the police and at Gary. The police report said that Gary was not physically hurt, but his bedroom was a mess.
Well, they're all different, but they're all centered around me. You know, the male is always the bad guy.
After her arrest, Gary Coleman appeared on a talk show called The Insider. He was asked if his relationship with Shannon was a bad one. He said, "I don't have a bad relationship with anyone." But as the questions continued, he got angry. He cursed at one of the people on the show and then stormed off the stage. Their problems continued, and in 2008, they appeared on a TV show called Divorce Court. This show is about couples who are thinking about getting divorced. During the show, Shannon said, if he doesn't get his way, he acts like a 5-year-old. He stomps the floor, makes noises, and throws things. She also said he sometimes hit his head against the wall. Gary, on the other hand, said the biggest problem was communication. When I try to explain things to her, she doesn't listen. My opinion doesn't matter, he complained.
I'm 40 years old and I can't do this for another 30 years.
You can't take it.
Even though the show could not legally divorce them, it was clear their marriage was not working. Later, it was confirmed that they had secretly divorced on August 12, 2008. Gary's lawyer later told People magazine, "They have been divorced since 2008. Gary wanted to keep it private." Gary also had problems with his anger. In 2008, he got into a fight at a bowling alley in Utah. A man named Colt Rushton wanted to take a picture of him. Gary Coleman did not like that and told him to stop, but Rushton kept taking pictures. Gary got so mad that he reportedly hit Rushton with his truck. After that, Gary Coleman was taken to court. He was charged with disorderly conduct and reckless driving. These are minor crimes, but they still got him into trouble. Later, Rushton also sued him for money. He claimed that Gary told him to pay $20 per picture if he wanted to take more. He also said Gary took his phone and hurt him when he hit him with the truck. He said he had injuries on his neck, back, and knee. The reckless driving charge would be erased if he stayed out of trouble for a year. Later, he settled Rushton's lawsuit by paying him an unknown amount of money. Gary's health problems got worse in 2010. He was working on a low-budget movie in Los Angeles when he had to be taken to the hospital. At the time, not many details were given about what was wrong with him, but he was later released. It seemed like he was okay, but that was not the case. A month later, he was a guest on a talk show called The Insider. While he was on set, he suddenly had a seizure. A seizure is when the brain has a sudden problem, and the body shakes or goes stiff. Luckily, there was a doctor on the show, Dr. Drew Pinsky, who was both a real doctor and a TV personality. He helped Gary until the ambulance arrived. Gary was rushed to the hospital and everyone was worried about him. Later that same year, though no one knew at the time, Gary had heart surgery. Because of his lifelong kidney problems, the doctors did not think he would survive for long. His ex-wife, Shannon Price, later said in an interview that doctors told him he might not live for another year. She explained that since he was born, he had problems with his kidneys, and his body was getting weaker. He had a new dialysis catheter put in, which helps clean the blood when the kidneys do not work. But even with the new treatment, doctors still said he would not live long. Sadly, in May 2010, the news came out that Gary was back in the hospital. This time, things were much more serious. He had fallen and hit his head badly. He was taken to a hospital in Provo, Utah, where doctors said he was in critical condition. People did not know much at first, but later it was revealed that his injury was very bad. His head was bleeding inside, which is called an intracranial hemorrhage. This can happen when someone falls and hits their head hard.
He'd fallen down the stairs.
His head is bloody. There's blood all over the floor. I don't know what happened. I really don't know what happened.
He died from bleeding in his brain. But the details around his death made many people suspicious. At the time, he was living with his ex-wife, Shannon Price, but they were not really together as a couple. Price said that on the night of the accident, Coleman came home from dialysis, which is a medical treatment for his kidney problems. He was tired and weak, but she asked him to make her food. A little while later, she heard a loud noise and found Coleman on the kitchen floor, bleeding. When she called 911, she did not follow the operator's instructions to help him. She complained about getting blood on herself and said she could not deal with it. When she was asked to lift his head, she refused. Many people thought this was strange.
His head is bloody. There's blood all over the floor. I don't know what happened. I really don't know what happened. I just can't be here with the blood. I'm sorry, I can't do it. I can't.
Price later said she thought Coleman would go to the hospital, get stitches, and be fine, but he did not recover. She went to sleep and was later told that he had gone into cardiac arrest. 2 days later, she made the decision to take him off life support.
Shannon had doctors take him off life support 2 days later. Friends still question the circumstances around his death.
At the time, Todd was on a trip with his family. They were jet skiing and camping, having a good time. Then Todd got a call saying that Gary was in a coma. He was shocked and didn't know what to think. Not long after that, he got another call saying that Gary had died. The news hit him hard. Gary's ex-wife was the one who made the decision to take him off life support. Todd and many others questioned how she was allowed to do that, since they were no longer married.
I got a call that he was in a coma, and she pulled the plug, and that hurt us all. She pulled the plug actually the day after.
Some people believed she still had legal control over his medical decisions. Others thought she should not have been the one to decide. Gary's death left a lot of unanswered questions. The official report said he fell down some stairs and hit his head. But Todd had doubts about that story. He wondered how a fall down just a few steps could cause such a serious injury. He wasn't the only one who thought something was strange about the situation.
They said he fell down some stairs, but I don't know how you can fall down 3 stairs and hit your head and it splits that wide open. So we don't know what happened, but we weren't there. But all we can do is speculate.
After Gary died, there was a lot of fighting between his parents, his business associates, and his ex-wife. They argued about his money and what should happen next. It got so bad that his funeral had to be canceled. People couldn't agree on anything, so in the end, there was no official funeral for Gary. Todd and one of Gary's close friends, Dion Meal, decided to hold a small private gathering on their own. They didn't want Gary to be forgotten, so they found a way to honor him in their own way.
So me and one of Gary's that hung out with Gary, one of his best friends, me and Dion Maya, we ended up doing things ourselves, just a small little thing for ourselves for Gary.
Losing Gary was heartbreaking for Todd, but it was even harder because it wasn't the first time he had lost a close friend. Before Gary, another Diff'rent Strokes co-star, Dana Plato, had also passed away. Dana struggled with a lot of problems in her life, including addiction and financial troubles. Her death was also a painful loss for Todd. He had to deal with losing 2 people he had grown up with, and it was very hard on him.
After losing Dana, losing Gary was very dramatic for me.
Some people also questioned how Coleman got his injuries. He was only 4 feet 8 inches tall, so falling should not have caused such serious damage. A friend who lived with Coleman before Price said she did not believe he just fell, but she would not say more. Price defended herself, saying she would never hurt Coleman. But many of his friends and family did not believe her. To this day, many people still wonder what really happened to Gary Coleman.
What you talking about? What you talking about? What you talking about? What you talking about?
After his death, things got even more complicated. Price and another woman named Anna Gray both claimed to be the beneficiary of his estate, per ABC News. And they weren't just making stuff up. Indeed, having previously managed Coleman's business dealings and running his company, Gray was listed as a beneficiary of his estate in a will made 2 years before his marriage to Price. After he wed, he produced another will, this one naming his ex-wife as a beneficiary. But they divorced in 2008. 2 years later, he died, and there were now 2 wills, which opened a dispute about who was the rightful inheritor. It would take 2 years. The ordeal eventually went to trial. Despite Price and Coleman being divorced, the court looked at her petition of the couple reuniting because she had valid claims of common law marriage. Yet, an investigation determined that the so-called will, in which Coleman named Price as a beneficiary, was handwritten. But most importantly, the couple was also legally separated. They even discovered that Price was an abusive partner to Coleman, causing him to seek a protective order against her the same year that he died. All of this disqualified Price as a beneficiary, and the judge ruled against her. Therefore, the only valid will was the 2005 document that named Anna Gray as his beneficiary. In the end, there was not much to fight over. Gary had lost his house to foreclosure, and he had little money left when he died. Anna Gray said she did not care about the money. She only wanted to make sure Gary's name was respected and that no one took advantage of him after he was gone. She said she wanted his ashes and for people to stop mistreating his legacy.